Well, hello, everybody. Pastor Grant and Pastor Stephen and I are here today. We want to give you an update on where we are and what our next phase of opening will be. And then after we have that basic announcement, then if you want to stay on, we just want to have an informal discussion, things we've been talking about and even things that we would talk about that have to do with the whole process that we're in right now. So phase one, we've been in phase 0, which is total lockdown. And phase 1, we anticipate beginning on June 1st, which is right around the corner. Phase 1 simply means we want to encourage people to get together in small groups in their homes and in the church. So we have designated that folks are, if they're 10 or less, can come into the church and meet in the annex. Social distance, of course, and if you're in the church, we want you to be wearing face masks. We'll talk about that a little later in our discussion. You'll have to disinfect behind yourself and restrooms, but we're not opening up the whole building just yet. But we do want you to feel free to schedule group meetings here at church if you want to, and you can schedule those meetings through Pat. Just let her know when you want to meet, and she'll put it on the schedule, and you can come and go according to that schedule. But we're not in total lockdown anymore, so Pat's going to be moving back to the church. Even though the doors will still be locked, we don't feel we're ready yet for people to be coming and going. We still follow the guidelines here ourselves. So when Grant and Stephen and I are in the same room, we wear face masks and we stay social distanced. And we decided to do Zoom today just because it was a way for us to be showing our face and be talking with each other. So by way of announcement, that's the general overlay of the announcement, and it affects small groups. And so Pastor Grant's going to talk about that. And then after that, it's going to affect youth ministry, and Pastor Steve will talk about that. Then if you want to stay on, we'll just have some discussion questions among ourselves. So Grant, how does this affect small groups?
Yeah, so small groups have been meeting mostly by Zoom. And so we would encourage people to, if they want to meet in their homes, you can do that. Again, if you want to, we're not saying that you have to do this. I think that the model is, I saw a Facebook post where there was somebody who was walking down the street and they're pregnant and they were wearing a mask, and the people who were coming towards them were not wearing a mask, but when they saw that she was pregnant, they put the mask up out of respect for what she was doing. And these people were probably not believers, but I think that's the attitude that we as believers want to have as we go into people's homes. And how this affects small groups. In the same post, she said that there was a gathering at somebody's home that was being put together, and it was without masks. And somebody said, "Oh man, I would love to go, but I can't because I'm a high-risk person." And so the organizer of the meeting reorganized it, and she made it so that everybody would have to wear masks at her house. Well, she didn't like that. This is my house. I don't want people to wear masks in my house. But so this person could attend, it was made so that she could do that. And that's kind of the spirit that I would encourage the small group leaders to do. You are the host in your own homes. So if you want to have people into your home, and it's a church event, of course you can do whatever you want. We don't manage people's lives, but if it's a church event and you want to have people into your home, and somebody can't come because it make them feel more comfortable if they were wearing masks, that's kind of the attitude. Of course, you can always, again, if it's a church event, if we can have gatherings outside, so without masks, 25 or less, and we're just taking the recommendations that are given to us from our authorities, because we are also under authority, and so it's a great time for us to practice that principle, that discipleship principle, that Christian principle that's handed down to us about submitting to our authorities when we can. And this is a time that we can do that as a witness to each other and to our community, and just living out obedience to Christ and to what He says. So we don't like that. Just so you know, we don't like it. None of us really likes that. But I do take joy in the opportunity to give something up for the sake of obedience in the gospel. Same thing with geographic clusters. I've been really encouraged that people have been meeting together. Even though we've been in isolation, I've got so many stories. So many of you guys have met people through the geographic clusters in your own towns who go to our church that you had no idea that you didn't know before. And so even during this time of isolation, the church has been growing. And so I want to encourage you to participate in those. You might meet somebody you don't know, or just have a moment of fellowship from our own church. We'll say more about that later, but the geographic clusters are the same principle would apply. We've been meeting on Zoom meetings, but I would encourage, it doesn't have to be the host. If you have a place that's big enough for up to 25 people outside, to invite your geographic cluster over. Perhaps some of those who've not been able to get on Zoom because of technology, they don't have the technology. And there are a number of those people who've not been able to do that. I'd encourage you to bring them over and meet in person. This is kind of an exciting thing that we get to meet in person. Hey, we're the church. We get to be in person with each other. I'm actually very excited about that. So to your comfort level, we'd encourage you guys to do that. Sunday mornings, if you want to worship together and sing with other people and be in the proximity of other people, I'd encourage you to do that. If you can have them in your home, you can, we'll talk more about that later. There's also going to be a meeting on Monday night, a Zoom meeting. The cluster leaders and small group leaders, I sent you out a link to that. I encourage you to get in there and talk to me about your concerns and your joys and how we move forward in that. But it's a breath of fresh air that, hey, we get to actually officially get together in person because we think that's both a responsible, at this point, it's a responsible thing and it's being allowed to do so. Who would have thought we'd ever be talking about that? All right, so that's my 2 minutes.
Yeah, Stephen.
I'll speak to youth and college students, but I just want to say, first of all, how important community is. You can't be a Christian without community and without the church. And the youth and teenagers, I mean, you guys have adapted to this via Zoom probably easier than everybody else has because of schools have been doing it, and you're just more technologically savvy and you have more screen adaptability than the rest of us. But it's still hard. I'm sick of Zoom. I didn't want to do this meeting on Zoom. I was trying to push us to do it another way, but this is the easiest way to do it. But Zoom is not, it's not the best way for community. So this is really exciting for youth ministry and for college ministry. So here's kind of the lay of the land for youth and college students in the next couple of weeks. Speaking first for junior high and senior high youth groups who have been meeting via Zoom for the last 10 weeks. Next week, so June 3rd and June 10th, we're going to continue on Zoom just to kind of finish out the spring. So June 3rd will kind of be a regular senior high and junior high will meet separately on Zoom. That'll kind of be your last Zoom for those groups. June 10th, we're going to bring the two groups together and do a wrap up of the year and kind of have a special step up night via Zoom that we've done in years past in the gym, but this year we'll finish it up via Zoom and let our high school seniors share a little bit about what God's doing in their lives and pass along any advice or encouragements from them. But then the following week, right after June 10th, we're going to try to be planning some outdoor events for the summer, both for junior high and senior high. So those will probably be in people's homes again. That's what we've done in the past, is have families host youth events at their homes. We don't know exactly what that'll look like, and we know some people may not be comfortable yet even wanting to do that. So we're going to take this a little bit by bit, but just know it's going to be our encouragement for bringing you guys together in person this summer outside, as long as we don't go over that 25 number. And if not, we can split up into other groups maybe. But that's exciting. So that's really good news for high school and junior high students. And I'll be meeting with those respective leaders to help plan those events in a safe way, but also in a really encouraging way this summer. Secondly, for college ministry, and this is really exciting, college students, your lives have been turned upside down the last several months. And I know it's frustrating. You've been back at home way earlier than you wished. But it is exciting. Lonnie Crampsey is going to be hosting a small group of college students this summer. And now that we can be encouraged to meet together in smaller groups, we'll probably be doing that in person as well with some social distancing. But we're talking through a book study or a Bible study that we can do with college students for all you guys that are back, and trying to reconnect you guys together. So that should be starting up sometime in early to mid-June as well. We'll keep you updated about that. But pass the word along. These are open invites. Again, we do kind of have a threshold of 25 that we're trying to stay under if we're meeting outside. But it's a really wonderful thing. We're going to be bringing people together in person again. So again, more news to come about what those things will look like. We may have some restrictions or some things that we've normally done we may not be able to do right away. But just stay close to your email, stay close to social media. We'll let you know in the weeks ahead what's going on.
So that's the basic announcement of what things are changing starting on June 1st. As you probably have guessed, nothing will be changing with our online worship. We still will maintain that and not be opening up for a gathering of people here to worship. There's just too many guidelines that get in the way of the kind of worship that we have been used to and would want to perpetuate. So we're looking for a way to open the doors on worship, but want to be safe and wise and a good testimony. So that's the announcement part of our Zoom meeting today. And if you want to stay on, you can hear some very informal thoughts that we've had. These guys look really cool, don't they? Like they have it all figured out and have no stress at all. And in fact, this has been a great time when we don't have to do ministry, but just go golfing and more yards. But in fact, this is a very stressful time for us, and I want you to know that we so appreciate your encouragements. Hang in there, and whether you write it or you call it, or just say it to us socially distanced, we know this is a hard time for you folks. And you should know it's a hard time for us. So I just want to ask Stephen first. So how's this changed your life? And then I'll ask Grant that. Just personally for a moment. How's this changed your life?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ken. We have small children, a 4.5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And as soon as this all broke out, one of the first things we had to do was pull them out of school and then make the decision at the time to permanently pull them out of school for the rest of the school year. And then obviously the schools just canceled everything anyway, so it made our decision moot. But we had to kind of go through that process of what do we do with our kids? And so at the beginning, it just was kind of maybe this is a 1 to 2, 3 week kind of deal. But then we realized, as everybody has, this is going to go on for a while, and we still are unsure what that's going to look like long term. But the biggest thing is just our kids have been home with us. So that means with my wife who works and myself who's in full-time ministry, we've had to do a lot of juggling. So I've been slowly taking books back to my house, and now I have a little mini library downstairs in my basement that's kind of turned into my pseudo office. But it's been a challenge. Sarah and I have had to rearrange our schedules in terms of our meetings, and we've had to figure out how to homeschool our children, how to do fun things with them, how to re-socialize them in safe ways, make hard decisions, say yes to some things, say no to some things. It's an exhausting season. It's an exhausting time for young families. And so just know, I know there's a lot of young families out there. For anybody that's watching with young children, you're not alone. You are not alone. And hopefully you've been able to connect with some people in the last couple of weeks who have reminded you of that. But if not, let me remind you now that I'm exhausted, not from pastoring, but just from life, just being with my children, being with my wife, and trying to figure out the stresses and anxieties that each of us individually are going through, and the grieving that we've gone through, and the gray area that is everything in life right now. It's a challenge. So yeah, we found a new rhythm, I suppose, but it's still uncomfortable. Going into the summer, not with a vacation plan or a respite necessarily of knowing what's next, or even realizing VBS is going to be different. I know those are all little stressors for each of us that build up over time. But on the positive side, Ken, I think for me, I've really learned slowing down. I mean, for a millennial, a 31-year-old, will be 32 in a couple of months. I've been going at a breakneck pace since college, at least. So for the last 10, 15 years. because that's the way life works. But this season has slowed me down. And one of my favorite things I'm doing right now is just 7 p.m. every night. I can go outside and water the plants for 15 minutes in the cool of the night and see flowers that are blooming and keep things alive, and just have a slow pace and a slow, steady walk that really is spiritually reviving and spiritually refreshing. So that's one of the questions of, as things begin to get normal again, or a new normal, how do we, and especially my generation, keep this really fresh, quiet, slower pace of life while returning to tasks and when restaurants open and schools open and all that. But yeah, that's kind of a big summary.
No. Yeah. Grant, how's it affected your life?
Yeah,
You're wearing a hat now.
What's that?
You're wearing a hat now.
I am wearing a hat because I like to have short hair, and it's just, I look like a what are those characters? I look like a hobbit when I take my hat off. So there's a lot of, it's exhausting, but my life has changed in a lot of ways in the things that Steve was just talking about. I look at, this isn't a joy for my kids, but we have family dinners a lot more than we used to have. We go for walks a lot more together as a family, just because I'm trying to be mobile. I'm not as mobile as I used to be. For me, a lot of my day hasn't changed. I come to the office, I sit in here, I do my work, I go home, and I've never had a big, broad geographic area that I go to, unless I'm going out to breakfast with somebody at Linda's or a coffee or something like that. But there's the other cool thing about that is when we go for walks, I see other people who are walking. I see a lot of people outside, a lot of people slowing down. And so one thing that we as pastors have talked about is that I'm sure that when sports pick back up again, that dance, sports, music lessons, whatever the activities that we're involved in, yoga, when people pick those things back up again, life will go at a frenetic pace again. But one thing that we've talked about as a church is we don't want that to happen at the church. We don't want people to be worn down by the church. The church needs to be a place where we come back. So that's one of the things that's changed. I think as we go forward, maybe that's a different question. But for me personally, it's emotionally exhausting because I'm an extrovert. And I want to be with people. And I didn't notice that until one day I was on a Zoom meeting all morning with you guys. And I went home for lunch and I was sitting with my kids and I realized I'm with human beings. Like I'm in the presence of human beings. I had the C.S. Lewis moment of I am with heavenly creatures, and my soul was fed by that. So it took me several weeks to realize how much just being in the presence of people was affecting me. But as if everybody, I feel like my burdens when I compare it to my kids, my daughter would come back from college, my son is a senior. I feel like the things that I've had to give up have been very, very small in comparison to what a lot of people. And of course, we've been healthy. So I feel like I've gotten through this pretty good by comparison.
Yeah. Well, I'm the old guy in the group, and the fact is, I've been doing a lot of things the same way for a lot longer than either one of you have. And right now, it just feels like I'm always second guessing myself. What am I missing, or what should be going on here? Maybe everybody's doing that. There's no ground that's really solid. We've talked about that. I'm also wanting to do what's right before the Lord, and I know there are a lot of opinions out there how we should do things or how we should open up. And I'm just grateful for the unity of our own leadership here, for Stephen and Grant, in this decision that we've made right now about worship and opening up for worship just because the governor says, okay, you can meet now. I want us to meet together and have some semblance of what being together is. And my phrase of what I imagine with face masks and social distancing, and don't dally in here, is I feel like that's a leper culture. And that's the last thing I want to walk into when I come to worship, is a leper culture. And so, so consequently, we're looking for small groups outside and looking for a way to relax the guidelines for them to change so that when we come together, there'll still be guidelines, but that it will be more freedom. And I lay awake at night thinking about that. Also, just on the home front, you know, Connie is involved in leadership at Portsmouth Christian Academy, and so it's a constant struggle for them. How do we open the school, and how do we keep people safe? And all of that's just a constant anxiety, because if we do this, then it affects this, and people would be happy here and happy there. We want to do what's right and pleasing to the Lord, and so do you. And so that's how we're doing, is just a constant reevaluating of where we are and what we ought to be doing. Let's talk about this as a time of testing, because it is. It's not just a time of testing for the church, but also for everybody in the world, a time of testing. And for some of us, there hasn't been a time of testing ever. We in America try to protect each other from times of testing, make sure people don't have too much trouble, and take this, take that, go here, go there. But we don't want you to stress out. We don't want you to struggle. And the fact is, this has come upon us, and it's a time of great testing. So as much as we'd all like it to go away, the Lord is in charge, and the Lord, I think, has given us an opportunity to prove our genuineness and our faith, and struggle with idols that we Christians have had and depended on, that now are being exposed. And so I want to talk with you two guys, or hear you two guys just talk about this time of testing, and what it is that we ought to learn, and what it is we ought to know in these days. So either one of you, jump in.
Let me jump in real quick. And as far as time of testing goes, is I lent out my pro account, and so we have 5 minutes left. So we'll be tested in our time, in the brevity of our answers. So Stephen, go ahead.
Good job, Grant. I was gonna make a joke about the testing of my beard growing, but I guess that's not working very well either. But no, I think that the test for this time that I'm seeing is exactly what you already mentioned, Ken. Just idols. It exposes things that we have lifted high above what they should have been. And so I think that's just a question each of us can answer individually as you're listening to this. But from a church perspective, I think it really does make you reevaluate, what is the church? What do we exist for? When we gather people together for worship, what are we trying to accomplish? And for me, I just keep coming back to Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, which is, don't give up the habit of meeting together. So that rings clear in this season. But then it goes on to say, encourage one another as you see the day approaching, the capital D day approaching. And so for me, it's just turned into this season of, how can I be an optimistic, encouraging, joyful person in the midst of sorrow and isolation and things being stripped away? Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so the test for me is, am I banking my whole life on the person of Jesus? And am I banking my calling and my role as a pastor on the idea and the realization and the reality that Jesus has it all under control? And I'm actually living and leading that way. That's been a test. It's a leadership test for me, both with my family and in the church. And so it's my prayer that test will reveal genuineness, as you mentioned, not only for my own self, but for all of you guys listening as well.
Yeah, I'd say for me that this is a difficult time to be an American, not just because of COVID, but because of everything else that's going on in our world. This is a difficult time to be an American. It's a good time to be a Christian, as far as the testing goes, because Ken preaches week after week about the principles, the discipleship principles. And we talk about giving up our rights, or loving one another, or these different things. But when it costs us something economically, right? So there's an economic impact. And we've talked about with us about church finances. Are we willing, like Paul, to give up the right to an income from the gospel? Are we willing to give those things up? And so there's a call to discipleship here that's pretty radical. We talk about it, but the testing is in, okay, now it's time to walk the walk. We love to get in our studies and talk about it. And it's very inspiring when we talk about it. It hurts when when we're asked to do things that we don't like. And because we're doing them doesn't mean we like them, but it means that we're submitting to them. And that's where I've been tested.
Mm-hmm.
And I see, yeah. 2 minutes.
I think all of us look at ourselves as consumers, and even in the church, I'll go if I like it, and I won't go if I don't like it. Or I'll wear masks if I feel like it, and I won't if I don't. And the reality is, the attitude of Jesus was always others oriented. As I understand it, masks are not for the sake of the person wearing them. It's for the sake of the person who is on the other end of you. So wear the mask for their sake, not for your sake. And this just turns everything upside down in this time of testing. Are you concerned about you, or are you genuinely developing a Christian concern for your brother and how you would love them and relate to them? So this is a time of crisis, time of testing. We've talked about the fact that this gives us an opportunity to start again with ministry and with ministry programs that we have now a chance to think about what's important and what do we necessarily have to do, and how do we do that. We never would have been able to do that if this time of stop had not happened. But this has given us time to work that out and figure that out. So time of testing, and obviously the Lord is desiring that we persevere and to demonstrate ourselves faithful before a watching world. Whatever happens, I want to be faithful is our desire. Any closing comments from the two of you?
Come back next time to hear more. There's more. There's always more. And
this is probably long enough.
Yeah.
Just pray for us as we're praying for you.
Yeah.
Mutual prayer.
Yeah. Amen.
All right. Take care.